Now we're talking about friction so much, I feel like, I'm the friction guy, I promise, right? I'm always hungry, and we should talk about that. I'm always interested in how can we accelerate. But one wise man once told me, Nicole, sometimes it's okay to slow down before you can accelerate.
On today's episode, we're diving into the world of driving growth in your digital experiences, and we'll discuss strategies for building high-performance teams, the importance of ROI, and share insights from the trenches of digital marketing. This is the Frictionless Experience, the podcast where we lay waste to digital friction. I'm Chuck Moxley.
And I'm Nick Paladino.
Joining us in the Frictionless studio is Nakul Goyal, a growth marketing expert with over 2 decades of experience in digital marketing and growth strategy. Currently, he's head of growth at CARFAX, and he's leading a high-performing team there overseeing a bunch of things: SEO, paid media, CRM, A/B testing, analytics, conversion optimization. Before CARFAX, he held roles at TripAdvisor and Berkshire Hathaway's Oriental trading company, leading their global digital growth initiatives. Nakul, welcome to the Frictionless Experience.
Chuck, Nick, thank you for having me. The pleasure is all mine.
Let's talk first about eliminating friction in digital growth. So you've talked about one of the ways that friction can hinder a company's digital growth is when you aren't aligned in your data, your technology, and your teams. Talk a little bit about that and how you tackle that.
That's a really good question, Chuck. When I think about friction, a lot of people often think friction is a bad thing. If you think about eliminating friction, it can often lead to lack of confidence. So the example that I'll give is if you're adding steps into your checkout process, for example, where there's a money or transaction that's about to happen, whether it's a small transaction or a big transaction, often companies think, hey, let me eliminate everything, speed to market. And they're most often right. However, in the chase or the spirit of moving fast and removing friction, sometimes what we lose is the confidence, right? For example, if you had reviews or customer testimonials or a Better Business Bureau or a very signed, secure logo that, believe it or not, still matters to consumers, if you remove that, or if the consumer doesn't get to see it, especially in a mobile device, it can actually hinder conversion. So I think friction has to be, the goal should not be no friction. The goal should be the right friction in the right places.
So right way to put it. And, one of my egregious examples, often page speed is lumped as a friction identifier. But if I were to remove everything on the CARFAX website and just say, please get a report, how many reports are you going to sell? Maybe a few, but not a ton. If it's just a white page, that's all it says. All those other aspects add value, and that value has to be assessed against whatever way you define friction. And we keep coming back to this concept. I think most recently with 1-800-Flowers, we were talking about how certain aspects, and you said it perfectly with buyer's confidence, certain aspects of the journey need to exist so that users have this feeling of confidence with the brand. And if you're not gaining that confidence, in the flowers example, 1-800-Flowers example, it was all about having more intimate connection with the gift and the gift giving process, really. And so it's just really cool to hear.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think the context there is also another key consideration to keep in mind is how frequently is that consumer transacting with you? Whether you take the example of 1-800-Flowers and gifting, or you use the example of CARFAX, where the consumer comes and is looking to, buy a CARFAX report for the car that they're about to buy, or for a car that they're about to sell. It's a transaction that might happen once in 5, 6, 7 years, right? So the consumer does not look at your product, your company, as intimately as you do. So they still need to gain confidence before they take out the wallet and enter the credit card details and personally identifiable information. They need to know that you can be trusted. So it's about trust, building trust in that transaction versus if I'm on Amazon on my app, and I'm buying 7 packages a day, even though if I'm doing that, by the way, which I am, there's a whole different problem that we should talk about. They should have friction so I cannot buy more than 2 times a day. But joking aside, coming back to it, on Amazon, I already trust them with my PII. I've downloaded the app, and I think there's less friction needed there. So again, if I go back to the time, it's about the right friction in the right places.
I think that's a good point. And I just observed this. I think the wording for an infrequent purchase, the wording as you go through that process and you're about to go to where you confirm everything before your credit card is charged is so critical in that. I have a friend who's building a site and he had me do a test transaction, and his wording was confusing that I thought I was committing before I got to the payment screen. And he had put all this fine print at the bottom, and it looked like and it was like signing up for insurance. It was like a big deal. And it stopped me from going to that next step when in fact, all I was doing was going to the payment screen. I still had a chance to confirm. So I've seen that worded very well on things like where it'll say continue, and they'll even say sometimes you'll confirm on the next screen, which gives you the confidence to know. And that's again, slowing it down and actually adding a step, but it gives you the confidence before that credit card is charged. And now you're fighting with your credit card company and the company you're buying from.
I also think brand consistency is a fun concept here, especially when you just said that the CARFAX repeat customer is 5 to 7 years. What was your product like 5 to 7 years ago?
Yeah, great point. If you think about the history of the company, CarFax was founded almost 40 years ago in an attempt to answer a very simple but super important question about the second largest purchase of a consumer's life, and that is a used or a new car. So, especially as a consumer was attempting to buy a used car, you want to know if this car has ever been in an accident. 40 years ago, when CARFAX didn't exist, there was no way to know. A dealer could typically pull out a note from the previous owner and say, "Hey, the owner that sold me that car told me the car is in great shape. You have to take my word for it." Right? So CARFAX is in the building the trust business by using our brand that we have invested billions of dollars of money over the last 40 years, and B, scouring the earth to get the data that is needed to provide that meaty confidence to the consumer. Is like, hey, here's everything you want to know about this car's history. It's like a birth certificate for that particular car. So 40 years ago, that was I would call it the one trick pony. And, if you say 5, 7 years ago, or 10 years ago, like the company has evolved in a way that we are now a life cycle company. We want to help the consumer throughout the ownership phase of their car. So today, when you're buying a used or new car, you want to know, is this car a great car? Should I buy this car? How much should I pay for this car? And after you've owned it for a certain number of years, should you sell this car now? And if yes, at what price? And then most importantly, during the ownership of a car, you'll service your car 1, 2, or 3 times a year: oil changes, tire rotation, tire replacement, etc. And typically what happens is a consumer goes to a dealer, the car is up on a lift somewhere in the back, the mechanic comes back or the service advisor comes back with an estimate, and you need to get some of that work done, but it still feels like a sticker shock. It's like, okay, your car needs $1,800 worth of repair. What CARFAX does uniquely is we build confidence. So if you download our Car Care app, what we'll tell you is, hey Nick, hey Chuck, the VIN number, the license plate of the car that you own today, we will notify to you what repair work is needed on your car and when, right? So that our friendly CarFox is notifying to you via email, text, and push notifications to say, hey, you might need to get new brakes on your car. And when we do that, it builds the consumer confidence. So you now know that is a work you need to do at some point. Now, next time you go to your favorite dealer, when the dealer tells you, you remember that little thing that CarFox told you. You might even pull it up and say, yeah, you're right. Do it. So you do the work as a more well-informed consumer. So to go directly answer your question, we have changed dramatically from being a one-trick pony to be a life cycle product for the consumer.
That's a good point because that then forces interaction throughout the year, throughout those 5 years between when you buy a car. Because I know I've gotten those reports on cars I bought. Do you guys work directly with the dealer in some way to set that up as well? I think.
100%. We work with tens of thousands of dealers, all OEMs. We have over 150,000 sources of data where these companies are providing us the data that powers our products. Again, the key thing is we build trust in the consumer. We're in the confidence business. The consumer wants to know what to do with the car, where to service it, where to buy it, and then where to sell it. We are there to help guide them along the way to go wherever they want to go.
Very cool. And I like this car care product that you have. I need it myself because I have a older Audi that doesn't just flash and tell me when I need service. So I
Right.
I
Yeah.
need some
No.
help.
And Nick, download that app. It's a shameless self plug. But if you think about it, not only does it tell you about the services and things like that, it'll also tell you when your registration and inspection and other things are due. Now, if you're lazy like me, when I don't remember. I don't remember, when my registration is due or my inspection is due. No, I can take a look at the sticker on the car that's parked outside and go figure it out. But I'm not gonna remember intimately as I should. So CARFAX will notify you and say, hey, your inspection is due, your registration is due, so you can go take care of your car. So we're taking the guesswork away from the consumer, and one centralized brand that you love and trust is notifying you on what needs to be done on your car. And by the way, we also provide the Zestimate, the value of your car that is based on the consumer's history, right? Or the vehicle's history. So we take the history of the car into account to calculate what is your current car worth, right? Again, literally that's the lowest estimate, but for your car.
Yeah, I bet your wife's car has it, Nick, because when I bought the car, they somehow signed me up for CARFAX as part of that whole thing. So I just started getting the notifications
Yes.
when to go in for service, which is really only once a year, and then when my registration, all that kind of stuff.
I'll have to check into that for sure.
Yeah, that's very happy to hear. We are doing that where we are allowing the dealer, where we've created products for the dealer that the dealer can help their consumers be well informed with our brand and data.
Yeah, not funny. My wife's car didn't come with that, and we discovered the other day her tag expired 6 months earlier. We somehow missed the email. Paid kind of a big penalty on that one.
Every year, I feel like I miss my registration, and in Georgia, it's tied to your birthday, so it should be very easy to not forget that. But every year, it's like December rolls around, and I'm like, "Oh man, I did it again!" And then I'm running over. It's only like a $5 late fee, but if the cops got me first, it'd be more than $5.
So, Nicole, have you experienced a situation either maybe coming into CARFAX or maybe at a prior company where you lacked alignment on your data, your tech, and teams, and therefore didn't have this kind of synergy and the ability to take friction out of the process? What's an example of that?
I'll use the example of one of my prior employers. This particular company was doing a major project to update their taxonomy. And it was a multi-month initiative, call it 6 to 8 months, tremendous effort to recategorize everything from categories, products and SKUs going into one category versus the other. And all of this work was happening in our product information management systems. There was no way, unfortunately, to preview the changes in a production environment. So I had to work very hard with our stakeholders and convince them to be able to put an environment with that data. Now, if you think about a company that does not do this all the time, your systems are there's a sort of a main environment, and when you make changes to the environment and you click save, your website updates. they don't really, now it feels 1997, but they don't really have a system where they can make changes and say, don't send it to production, send it to this other environment, right? So that capability did not exist. So I was asking for that capability, and they're like, Nicole, you're out of your mind. You're going to make us do what? And why? So we can preview the changes? We know this is going to be great. Are you kidding me? We don't want to do it. You're making us spend $1 million to do XYZ. And that's stupid work. We could may take that investment elsewhere. So it was an uphill battle. However, I think once we talk to the stakeholders with some examples of what we are trying to do and why a staging environment would be helpful. I mean, nobody's intentionally saying, you know what, let me hurt the business. I think it's lack of awareness. So I took it personally on me that it's my job to educate and align and prioritize what needs to be done. Again, it starts with education, alignment, and prioritizing, and being very, very clear in what you're asking for and why. Once you do that, it becomes very clear. So fast forward, we built a staging environment. Oh my God, let me just put it this way. Within half an hour, we found so many opportunities. And I think fixing those opportunities before going to production saved us tens of millions of dollars. So it was intentional friction. We probably slowed down by a couple of weeks as a result of A, building the staging environment, B, it was expensive, and C, delayed the project by 2 to 4 weeks, but all good things.
Yeah, and that's like an internal friction too. But what I find so amazing about this, and I know you're going back in time in the sentiment here, it's such a basic thing nowadays. So what is profound today that then becomes basic 10 years from now? There's just so much that's happening in the digital space that should be working in a better way. And maybe you can look at some brands like Amazon that make you buy way too much stuff and think what's their experience that's helping for you to just run up your credit card bill. Must be Amex just doing it.
The thought that comes to mind is, again, we're in 2024. And if you think about shipping product, right? Our product teams, our growth teams, our marketing teams, we want to move fast. We're actually asking ourselves, how can we enable and empower our teams to move faster? At the same time, we're asking them to slow down a little bit and make sure you test and learn, test everything. Now, testing is fundamentally slow because you're asking your teams to go through a toll booth, and the toll booth might have a line. They might have a queue, and there are 5 cars lined up. And if you want to pass through that lane, you have to wait for your turn. And they're like, you know what? I'm going to skip the tollway and I'm going to keep going this other direction without realizing they're unintentionally hurting the business. I think, 10 years from today, that's just how it works, right? There's only one way, which is the tollway, which is what happens on a lot of freeways these days. So it's creating that friction along the way. Now we're talking about friction so much, I feel like, I'm the friction guy, I promise, right? I'm always hungry, and we should talk about that. I'm always interested in how can we accelerate. But one wise man once told me, Nicole, sometimes it's okay to slow down before you can accelerate, right? I think it's building the right processes, the right guardrails, because there's a tremendous amount of risk. And you have to put the guardrails in place so you don't unintentionally shoot yourself in the foot. I speak to marketers in different industries all the time. I was speaking to a senior marketer at one of the big e-commerce brands that I cannot name. And this individual, I remember telling me, in the last 6 months that they move fast, which is great. They take one step forward and 2 steps backward. And the 2 steps backwards are self-inflicted wounds. And they felt like they'll never be successful. because they keep losing. And then when they look at their metrics, they don't get the resources they want or deserve because their metrics look bad, and nobody understands the self-inflicted wounds as much as they should. So again, going back to the question that you asked, I think 10 years from today, or hopefully 3 years from today, this becomes a norm. It's already becoming a norm in a lot of places. I think it's getting the tools and the technology and the systems in place. So there's only one way.
Yeah, and to your sentiment about many brands are already doing that. We had an episode with Catherine Geniak from American Eagle, and that's exactly what she was talking about. Was their culture was almost to the point where it was debilitating, and they were testing so many tiny little things that it was slowing them down so much, but it was allowing you to have a proof positive to go forward.
And what you just talked about, Nakul, kind of runs counter to the move fast and break things mentality that has been around from the internet world. So it sounds like you're saying you think what's going to happen is sort of a settling or a maturing of the digital experience.
I think it's about how you ship the right things at the right pace without the unproductive internal red tape, right? How do you make it so seamless that nobody feels that it's slow? So everybody is aligned. And two, there's no other way. Right now, there's two options. You can either test or not test. Testing might make it look like my product, the one I'm shipping, ready to ship, which I've worked so hard over the last 3, 6, 12 months, which I know is going to win. It's my baby. We're going to test. And by the way, when I test, it might lose. So guess what? I'm going to just ship it because I know I can bet it's going to win, right? So again, nobody's intentionally trying to do it. So if they have an option, they try to take the other option, not intentionally. They want to move fast and they're so passionate about it. And when you say, no, you should test it, they're like, you're out of your mind, Chuck. Why should we test? I can tell you it's going to win. You want to take a bet? That's how passionate they are about it, right? Again, nobody's trying to hurt the business. What I'm saying is going back to the next question, I think fast forward 3, 5 years from today, I think there's tools and systems in play. Like, this is how we have operated at Oriental Trading Company or TripAdvisor or CARFAX, where everybody's aligned, we win together, and we're doing the right things at the right time at fast pace and attempting to remove obstacles and roadblocks at all times. That's our job, right? To create processes and tools so that you can move fast.
So I know he's a bit of a polarizing personality nowadays, but I saw a comment from Elon Musk that said something along the lines of, if you don't acknowledge that you don't know everything, then you will inherently have a bias to prove that it's right. So rather than proving that you're right, you should seek out every day to just be less wrong. And I thought that was a really interesting way to think about it. Like, how can I be less wrong about my hypothesis rather than proving it to be correct? And I think it's something that's really good. I'll find the actual thing, and then whenever I make some LinkedIn post about this, I'll refer back to it, I'm sure. But yeah, it was a really fun thing to think about.
No, really good thing. I think what comes to mind is confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is real. If you believe in something, you're gonna see everything that favors it, and anybody or anything that goes against it, you don't like it or you don't see it, right? So that confirmation bias is real, and I love the quote that you shared.
So, Nicole, you've led some very large, high performing teams. What do you think are kind of the secret ingredients or the key factors in cultivating these high performing teams?
I think it's creating a process, a blueprint, a framework, and operationalizing it. If you have the autonomy and the support from your organization to do it, it's easy peasy. And I have that at CARFAX. So the way I think about this is a simple framework that I can walk you through the high level categories. And if interested, we can zoom in into any of the categories or stay at the forest view level and go to another forest. So the process I think about, it starts with team, right? When you think about building a high performance team, think about the word team. You have to put the right people at the right place, and interviewing and finding the right people, it's an acquired art. I didn't go to school and learn how to interview other people. I don't think that was a coursework at that time, at least. I don't know if it's in school today on how to interview people. I'm sure they're learning on how to interview because you're going to be interviewing for a job, but I don't think they ever train you on how to interview other people. So interviewing and, finding out the right skills and DNA and the attributes that you're seeking for somebody to be successful in that role, I think that's number one. Number two is clear goal setting. At any given time, a person should know what they're responsible for, and they should be able to, I believe in SMART goals and OKRs, so they should be very specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely, right? So there has to be a time constraint to it. And then I think if you think about it, at any given time, they should know how they stand against those goals, not once a year. You can't have a process, a system where every month you tell somebody, hey, you're doing a great job, you're doing a great job, you're doing a great job. And at the end of the year, there's a big, massive surprise with a 7-page performance review, like, you suck. If an employee is surprised by the performance review, I think you have failed as a leader. That's how passionately I think about this performance management, right? So again, stay on number two is having clear goals, having clear accountability, but also believing in having a system that shows you where you stand against that goal. And by the way, if you're not trending in the right direction, then how can we help you? Right? It's not like, hey, we set your goal at the beginning of the year, you go figure it out. If you're not meeting your goal, you have to figure it out. No, we win together, right? We have your back. So it's figuring out together. That's the mindset. Number three is building rituals. So I'm a strong believer of building rituals around the goals. So I don't worry about the outputs, what somebody is doing today, tomorrow, next week, next month. I could care less. What I care about is the outcome. And how they get there is not my problem. So if we're going to say we're going to meet in Chicago next week, it's about, hey, let's meet in Chicago. And once we're there, we'll party or celebrate or whatever. How you get there, it's none of my problem. You could take the train, you could take the airfare, you could take a hopping flight. That's your problem, right? So again, it's establishing rituals around the outcomes, right? So whether you meet, there's certain rituals I have that are daily that are tracking the KPIs. There's certain rituals I have around that are weekly, monthly, quarterly, and so on. So I'm a big believer in creating rituals around the metrics, and I believe in the system called RAG. For years, I didn't even know there's a framework called RAG, red, amber, green, right? So, on my game plan and dashboard, I can literally, imagine there's a dashboard on my screen. I could step 10 feet away and look at the dashboard from 10 feet away and say, I know where to zoom in on because I can see the red, yellow, and green. And the best part, I don't even need my glasses to see the red, amber, and green, right? So I can see where to zero in, which team individual needs help, and then figure out a way to help them. And number four is, I believe in this performance management. At any given time, a person should know where they stand. And I believe my leadership philosophy is radical candor. So if you haven't read the book, Radical Candor by Kim Scott, I highly recommend it. Huge fan. That's been the core of my philosophy, my leadership philosophy, which I'm oversimplifying, but it's care deeply and challenge directly. So I care about the people with deep empathy, but at the same time, it's my job, it's my duty to challenge the people very directly and not mince my words. Now, I'm not saying I'm a jerk and I would yell at people, but I think a lot of times people either are attempt to be too nice to each other or not treat each other as adults. We're all adults. We're all working with the same company towards a common goal. So you care deeply, but challenge directly. Life is good. So that's my very simple 4-pronged framework on hiring the right people. 2, building clear goals. Number 3, rituals around the goals and the outcome. And number 4 is constant feedback and performance management. Right? We do monthly or quarterly reviews, and the way we do reviews is very simple. It takes people 5 or 10 minutes to put their review together, and we spend 15-20 minutes talking about it. So in half an hour we're done. So it's not a burden on anybody. We're getting to the point we're going to do annual reviews in about a month. The annual review is the easiest piece. You know why? It's a summary of your reviews year to date. Because I don't remember, if you think about it, does anybody remember what they did in January this year? I don't remember what I did yesterday. So why would we attempt to put somebody under pressure and say, give me a summary of everything you did this year? They don't remember. They're looking at their calendars and meetings and wasting their time and energy. If you do it monthly, like, hey, what did you do for me last month? Where did you succeed and where did you struggle? And how can I help you? And what's your goal for next month? Life is good, right? So I think it's building that framework and putting it in practice. A lot of people talk about it. It's very hard to do it unless you have the autonomy and the support from your leader and from the organization. We believe in that, and we have been very successful at that.
You know what I love the most about all of this is you're the head of growth at CARFAX, and you're most passionately talking about how your team is what's most important. That is such a great feeling to hear. Like, that is how you grow.
And Nick, I think the entire organization believes in that mantra. We actually have our strategy clearly defined. I'm looking around if I can find it handy. When you visit our office, I'll show you next time. We have gears. The middle gear is our team gear. Then we have 4 other gears. The 4 other gears are intertwined with each other. What are those 4 other gears? It's our product, so building great products. Then it's our dealers and partners. Our dealers and partners help work on that. 3 is our data. So we have to have the accident and service data. And 4 is our consumers. We want to reach hundreds of millions of consumers who are looking to buy, sell, and take care of their car with more confidence. The team is in the center. So as the team moves, we build great products. We get more dealers on our systems using our products and paying for it. 3, then we get more accident and service data, and then we drive more consumers, and then you have an amazing flywheel, right? So this thing that I'm talking about is not limited to my team. Our whole company operates like that. That's the DNA of who CARFAX is, which is why I've been so excited, proud, and fortunate to be a part of this winning team for the last 8.5 years.
So let's talk about ROI. How do you approach ROI, measure ROI in maybe the programs you run, the tests you run, removing friction? How do you think about ROI?
I love it, Chuck. You're speaking my language. When you think ROI, all of a sudden my eyes widen. I have a big smile on my face. When I'm hiring people, I am seeking people that live and breathe in the world of ROI. You'd be surprised how many people I get to interview that can't even spell ROI. Like, how hard can it be? I believe in ROI so passionately, and the way I describe it is 2 things. My middle name is ROI. I don't have one. I don't have a middle name, but if I had one, I think it'd be ROI. And 2, I think I bleed ROI. So that's how passionate I am towards ROI. Now, in no way, again, I'm frugal. I run lean teams. We all do. That's our job, our duty, our obligation towards our employers. So you have to be careful and watch the money. But at the same time, you have to be open-minded and not shooting yourself in the foot, right? So you have to be, you don't have to be penny wise, pound foolish. And I think that's the lesson I've learned over the last 15, 20 years. Back in the day, I probably was penny wise, pound foolish. Now I'm not, right? So going back to your question about ROI, there's a lot of things. That's a loaded question. I'll probably give one or two examples. When you think about the team's goals, like when it goes to like whether you think about the if you think about the four phases of building a high performance team, or the four prongs, if you will, I said the first prong is hiring the right people. If you want somebody who's spending millions of dollars, you want the people in the team to have that DNA. Because if they don't have that DNA of the ROI mindset, measure everything, measure what matters, and not go after vanity metrics, you'll be sleeping like a baby. And I like to sleep like a baby. I do sleep like a baby, right? So you have to hire the right people. Two, again, your goals have to be outcome driven and say, hey, if you're going to spend X amount of money, what am I going to get in return? And that applies to everything. It applies to the money we spent. The ROI applies to people we hire. We want to make sure that when we hire somebody, that they provide ROI to the business. Number three, we want to make sure any project. So let's say an individual or a team is working on something. Let's say it costs them a month of time. Time is money. You can do back of the napkin math and say, okay, 7 people working on this project for, let's say, 2 months. If you make an assumption and say everybody makes $100,000, and you calculate everybody's time to be $50 an hour, based on simple math, you can calculate 2 months of work. So 1 month of work by an example person might be $8,000. And if it's 2 months of work, that's $16,000. And if you have 7 people, that's a little over 100K. If the impact of the work that they're doing is not measurable to be $500,000 or more, why are we doing it? So a lot of people often think their blind spot is ROI is applied to where money is spent, but time is money. And this is how I connect the time is money, right? So again, ROI applies on people, ROI applies on money you spend, obviously, and ROI is where you spend, your teams are spending time, but also your own time. I take a look at my calendar to say, where am I spending time, and is it the right thing to do for the business? So you have to deeply think about ROI and apply it all places.
Yeah, if ROI is your middle name, you could just say your middle name's Roy. That would be easier.
I like that. I might start saying that. Nakul Goyal.
There you go.
That sounds great. Actually, that very clean.
So Nakul, what's a widely held belief about driving frictionless digital experiences that you fundamentally disagree with? You think people get wrong?
Oh, that's awesome. That's a great question, Chuck. So, I'll use the concept of, building product and building an MVP, which is a minimal viable product. So if you think about this concept of a minimal viable product, and then you apply this sense of urgency or the ROI mindset that we just applied, our teams are always under pressure to deliver a certain MVP by a certain date. What levers do they have in order for them to ship this MVP by that date? What they're going to do, we're unintentionally incenting them to remove scope. And I think this is friction that is self-inflicted. We put undue pressure on our teams for them to get this MVP shipped by a certain date. And when they run into obstacles, they have no choice but to remove some capability or features, and it's no longer viable. They will ship something that is not viable because a stakeholder, a crazy person asks, hey, why can't we do it yesterday? And you might be looking at one of those crazy people right now on the call, right? I think what we get wrong is that balancing act. It's hard, right? So if there is, pressure on meeting a certain date, it's just a date. Now, don't get me wrong, dates and deadlines are important, but if it's not truly customer facing, hey, we made a commitment to the street that we're going to ship out 1 million Teslas tomorrow, you can't be late because the street is going to butcher you for being late. So you can't be late in those scenarios. But or if you're sending a rocket to the space and you want to catch it on its way back, you cannot be late and say, sorry, that feature is not ready. It's going to have tremendous impact on you, your business, your department, your team, and your shareholders. So I think what we get wrong is sometimes in an attempt to meet an artificially created deadline, we take the scope away, and that's the wrong lever. I think what I would do is ask for forgiveness and say, sorry, I was going to deliver it by this Friday. Guess what? We're going to delay it by a week and do it right. That's what matters more. But a lot of people often say, well, I made a commitment that I got to get it done by this date. So they succumb under pressure and do what they shouldn't do, I think.
Yeah, and I like your comment with the MVP. You start cutting corners, and then you're no longer viable. I think that sums up where people get it wrong all the time, is that they're willing to get to a point where it is not viable. And what also is something I've experienced and seen frequently is MVPs are often final versions.
Right.
And so there can be a
100%.
situation where you release the MVP with the intent that you're going to come back in a quarter and improve it. But the powers that be end up creating new initiatives, new priorities, new directions that mean you never go back to it. So in your situation, you take it and it's sub-viable. Now you're leaving a sub-viable experience. That's friction. That's your friction experience right there that we were hoping to test out. As you said, you should test everything, yet we weren't able to successfully test out to say it wasn't viable and then be humble enough to say either this doesn't go live on time or this doesn't go live at all or something else. We ship it and we left it.
One smart person at CARFAX said, it's no longer an MVP, it's MLP, minimum lovable product, which I love, obviously, right? And I think two is, if you think about incenting people to the outcome, not the output, you would think they have a little bit more leeway into saying, hey, I've stripped the MVP so much that it's no longer an MLP, and therefore we should not do it because it's not going to influence the outcome. So they are not incented to just meet a date, which is output to begin with, right? So don't measure output, measure outcomes.
That's awesome. This has been such a great conversation, Nakul. How can listeners connect with you? What's the best way to find you?
I'm on LinkedIn. You can Google my first name, last name. I think if somebody wants to get in touch, I'm very passionate about the work I do. If anybody wants to reach out, have a question, this is something I don't often do. I'll give out my personal email address. It's first name, last name @gmail.com. I'm making it very easy. So Nakul Goyal @gmail.com. And Chuck, if you ever feel like you're mispronouncing my name, I'll make it very easy for you. In your head, think not cool, and you'll pronounce it right automatically. You can't help it. I'm not cool. And then you'll automatically come out right.
That's a great memory trick. I'll keep that in mind. I wish you told me that at the beginning of the call. All right. Well, this has been a great episode. So be sure to like us on your favorite podcast app so you're notified when we have a new episode. If you have not signed up for our newsletter that comes out on the opposite weeks, we have episodes. Be sure to visit us at thefrictionlessexperience.com. Sign up there so you get the newsletter. And as always, you can reach or connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm at Chuck Moxley, and Nick on LinkedIn is
In Paladino. Chuck, I really loved how Nakul was so passionate about his team as the head of growth. It really shows a lot about his leadership style.
I agree, Nick, and his whole framework for building high-performing teams is fascinating. Having the right people, having clear goals, establishing rituals, and then that idea of radical candor, of caring deeply but challenging directly. Really love that.
Yeah, what stuck out for me was his perspective on friction, which of course we love here. That the goal shouldn't be zero friction, but rather the right friction in the right places. Like, sometimes you just need to trust signals during checkout, even if they add steps.
True, and thinking about ROI, or should we say Roy, since that's his unofficial middle name, I love this point about how ROI isn't just about the money you spend, but also about the time you invest. That example he gave about calculating the cost of team members' time on projects, that was eye-opening.
Yeah, it's the right way to think about it, and his take on MVPs was also spot on. How we often compromise the viable part just to hit artificial deadlines. I really liked his suggestion of making it an MLP instead, minimum lovable product.
Though I have to admit, I'm still thinking about getting that CARFAX car care app after hearing about all those registration reminders. Might save some late fees on your birthday registration, Nick.
But seriously, great guest and really practical insights on building teams, measuring ROI, and creating the right kind of friction in digital experiences.